Welcome. The period leading up to and immediately following the Civil War was defined by a profound constitutional crisis and a desperate struggle for equality. We explore three key areas: the legal and social breakdown before the war, the harsh realities of wartime, executive power, and the complex effort to fundamentally redefine citizenship through Reconstruction. The path to war was paved by the inescapable conflict over slavery and its extension. In 1857, the Supreme Court delivered a catastrophic blow to anti-slavery efforts with the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision. The court ruled that people of African descent were not, and were never intended to be, citizens under the U.S. Constitution. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney asserted that black people were considered so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. The ruling also declared the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, prohibiting Congress from banning slavery in the territories. This controversial decision inflamed the national debate and deepened the divide leading to war. Fueling the moral outrage was Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, which awakened the North to the harsh reality of slavery. Published in 1852, the book sold 10,000 copies within a week, and Abraham Lincoln allegedly called Stowe the little woman who wrote the book that made this great war. The central cause of the war was fundamentally the dispute over whether slavery ought to be extended. Despite numerous attempts at legislative deals, known as compromises, the underlying dispute could not be resolved. Lincoln himself rejected final compromises, like the Crittenden Plan, refusing to abandon the Republican platform against the expansion of slavery. Facing armed rebellion, President Lincoln took decisive action, notably the controversial suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. Starting in April 1861, this suspension, which allows a prisoner to be held indefinitely without indictment, was denounced by Chief Justice Taney in Ex parte Merriman as an unconstitutional usurpation of power by the executive. Taney argued that the power to suspend the writ rested with Congress. Lincoln ignored the ruling, arguing that he could not allow all the laws but one to go unexecuted, and the government itself go to pieces. Congress eventually passed the Habeas Corpus Act of 1863, retroactively approving Lincoln's power while asserting its own control over the writ. Nevertheless, this period established a precedent where the judiciary's powers were subjugated during wartime, with judges' orders often ignored by military officers. The Civil War forged a complex relationship between President Lincoln and abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Douglass was initially highly critical of Lincoln 2 years into the war. Frustrated by the president's refusal to allow black men into the military and his unwillingness to fight primarily for abolition, Douglass famously lamented that the Union was striking the rebels with a soft white hand, when we should be striking them with the iron hand of the black man. Douglass met with Lincoln, hoping to address the unfair treatment of black soldiers, including unequal pay, lack of promotions, and lack of POW protections. By August 1864, Lincoln, facing re-election doubts, invited Douglass back for a second meeting, asking him to lead a network to help enslaved people escape the rebellious states in case he lost the election. This mission, though ultimately unnecessary after Lincoln won, shifted Douglass from a frustrated outsider and fierce critic to special presidential advisor. The drive for fundamental constitutional change was spearheaded by the radical Republicans, who believed Reconstruction should punish the South and reorganize society. They successfully pushed through the Civil War amendments. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment granted citizenship and equal protection to black Americans, the 15th Amendment granted black men the right to vote. Following Lincoln's assassination in 1865, radical Republicans temporarily dominated Congress, implementing military rule and requiring Southern states to ratify the 14th Amendment to rejoin the Union. However, their power waned quickly. Reconstruction essentially ended with the Compromise of 1877, leading to the rise of Jim Crow laws. Reflecting on Lincoln's legacy after the president's death, Douglas noted the complexity of the man whose portrait hung in his study. Douglas acknowledged that in his interests and prejudices, Lincoln was a white man, and suggested that black Americans were, at best, only his stepchildren. Decades later, speaking during the period of retreat from civil rights gains, Douglas emphasized that achieving true peace required liberty, law, and justice first. The struggle to fully heed Douglas's call and defend the meaning of the Civil War amendments would continue for another century. The crisis of the Civil War ultimately forced the nation to begin redefining who belonged and what rights they possessed. The conflicts and partnerships of this era between North and South, President and Court, Lincoln and Douglas, laid the essential, though fragile, foundation for future struggles for civil rights.